bylaw is passed, the person or the public is not entitled to appeal the decision. If a person of the public body does not make oral submission at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Belleville before the related bylaw is passed, the person of the public body may not be added to as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the local planning appeal tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there is reasonable grounds to add a person to the public body as a party. And last, any person wishing to be advised of the Belleville Planning Advisory Committee's recommendations or City Council's decisions with respect to today's applications are requested to leave their name and their address at the appropriate notification sheet located on a clipboard beside the podium, which is up there to our left and your right. In general, any recommendations made today will be forwarded to our next City Council meeting. Okay, we got that out of the way. A little housekeeping. Okay, so I'll call the meeting to order and call for attendance. And seeing we have attendance here, Councillor Boyce is here, Councillor Carr, Councillor Graham, Councillor Miller, and Councillor Deniers is absent, and I'm filling in for her. Disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Seeing none. Item number 3 on our agenda, we have a couple of applications, the public meeting and the Planning Act. 3.1 in our agenda on our blue sheets. We have proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 10245 as amended, which is at 135 Station Street and 50 Albion Street, City of Belleville, County of Hastings. The file number is B771051. The application / owner is 199-3388 Ontario Inc. And the agent here today is RFA Planning Consultants Inc. And we have the information on the board. The Planning Committee has all the information in the blue sheets. And before I reach for staff, I'd just like to recognize our new staff member, Stephen Ashton, is our new Manager of Planning Policy. Welcome aboard, sir. Welcome to the City of Belleville, and welcome to your first meeting. So the 3.1's on the floor, and staff, you have the floor.
Okay, so this application is for 135 Station Street and 50 Albion Street. It's for a 6-story, 103-unit residential apartment building with 886 square meters of commercial space. So the application is for rezoning from restricted industrial to residential and residential 4th density to residential 7th density with special provisions, mainly recognizing the reduced landscaping area, reduced off-street parking, and a recognition of minimum frontage of 17.3 meters along Station Street. In terms of the official plan, the subject lands are designated city center within the Riverview neighborhood. Staff have reviewed the application. It is consistent with provincial policy statements and the official plan, including the intensification plan for the city center area. And tonight we do have the consultants here to present the application.
Great, thank you very much. So in the audience, in the gallery, do we have anyone in attendance that would like to speak in support of the application? And if you do, please come forward, introduce yourself, and you have the podium. Just hit that little button. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Thank you. My name is Ruth Ferguson Althouse, and I'm here on behalf of the owners of 135 Station Street. And I have a brief presentation to make to the committee and members of the public for this application for rezoning. The project is known as Magnolia Garden Residence, and the presentation will give an overview of the site location, the features, the city center official plan policies, and the proposed building and servicing plans. The site is located on Station Street, and the overall property itself is 0.9 hectares or 2.3 acres in area. It has 57 feet of frontage on Station Street and 75 feet of frontage on Albion Street. There are 2 arterial streets in the area. Station Street, where it has direct frontage, is designated as an arterial street, and it is very close to the intersection with Canifton Road, and it also fronts on a local street, Albion Street and Albion Way. I've included some slides from the planning report to provide some information on the surrounding land uses and the site itself. These are some pictures of the portion of the surrounding land uses on the the north side of Station Street. There's an apartment across the property on the north side, medium-density apartment, three-story apartment, as well as across from Memorial Park along Station Street, and then very close to the Riverfront Trail and to the downtown. It's also immediately abuts on the north side of the site, on the south side of Station Street, the Queen's Family Medical Center, as well as just to the west of the site is the Lions Center and Abigail's Place that is on Station Street as well. At the intersection of Albion's Way, there is a commercial site, just a car dealership for used cars just east of the site, and then on Albion Street there's medium-density housing, and then further to the south there's low-density housing on Albion Street. The next couple of slides show the actual property, and this shows the site frontage on Station Street where the driveway is positioned, the frontage, and it's adjacent to a transit stop in front of the medical center. The midpoint of the site is this picture on the slide on the left. The site itself, as you can see, has predominantly been cleared. There were some former warehouses on the site, and the site itself has now been cleared of all buildings, so that it is vacant now. And it was formerly used for industrial and service industrial type uses, wholesalers for food uses. The soil and the groundwater have been tested, and they meet provincial standards for residential uses. The slide on the left shows the contractor's yard that is immediately on the south side of the property. This is not owned by the applicants, and as well behind that there is a treed escarpment that extends to the south and up to the more southern reaches of Albion Street. This entrance on Albion Street is shown on the right slide with the existing construction yard and fence, and then at the lower right-hand side is the view of the medical building that abuts the property. This property is within the city center designation of the Belleville Official Plan, and this is a slide from Official Plan Amendment 23 that was done 5 years ago in 2012. There are 7 districts or neighborhoods in the city center that were determined through the updates in 2012 to have various opportunities for intensification for both commercial and residential uses. And this property is within the Riverview neighborhood, which is shown in yellow on the slide. Through the work that was done by our firm using GIS programs, we were able to quantify both the short, medium, and long-term intensification potential in the city center. And within the Riverview neighborhood, there was determined to be the potential for 330 dwelling units to be added over the, as I say, the short to medium long term. And in the long term, it actually is over 700 units that were calculated within Riverview. The types of building form that were set for the Riverview area were predominantly 3-story townhouses and 4 to 6-story apartments or condominiums. This is a slide that shows the details of the Riverview Official Plan Amendment 23. So it's an enlargement of that area, and I've circled the subject property in blue on the slide in the circle. On that property, on the specific property, it was anticipated that there would be a 4 to 6-story apartment building in a configuration that is perpendicular to or parallel to Station Street. Also, this area outlined in red, including this property, were added to the city centre as part of Official Plan Amendment 23 to recognize the opportunities of these properties to be considered for intensification. So the building footprints are shown in yellow. The building height is shown within the building footprint. So you can see there are a variety of 4- to 6-story apartment buildings, as well as a number of 3-story townhouse units that were anticipated for this area. This area of Riverview was identified as one of the key locations for intensification in Official Plan Amendment 23, where there were many opportunities for redevelopment of former industrial or commercial sites or vacant properties to higher densities. And there's a detailed overview of both the provincial policy statements on intensification as well as Official Plan Amendment 23 in my planning report, which I answer any questions that you have about that. But in the planning report that was submitted to the city, there was a detailed overview of how both the height and the density that's proposed for this site meets all of the criteria of the city centre designation, and specifically the locational criteria for the Riverview neighbourhood. There was supposed to be a business consultant here this evening from CMHC, and unfortunately he wasn't able to get out of Toronto today, so I'm going to do my best to talk about affordable housing and the need for it in the city of Belleville. As many of you know, there has been a lot in the news lately, not just in Belleville but throughout the province, about the increased demand for affordable housing. And specifically, this project would be purpose-built as rental affordable housing, and 30% of Canadians rely on rental housing. They are not able to aspire to home ownership, and so rental housing, 30% of the city population relies on that. In this particular project, all units will be affordable at a range of 80 to 90% of CMHC market rents. And the owners have received seed funding from CMHC for this project. It's intended specifically that the building would be targeted for older persons and seniors. It's not being developed for young families. It's felt that it'd be a more suitable site and building for older persons. We just saw, I think it was last week in the news, that there is a need for affordable housing in the area of a substantial number of persons on a wait list for housing. 700 was the number that was quoted. Within the city, I've researched some of the CMHC data. There's a 25-year low vacancy rate in the city, and it's been a 15% increase just in 2017 alone of the price of new homes in Quinte. So that gap of increased cost to buy housing and the reduced vacancy rate is putting a lot of pressure on people that are looking for housing. Rental housing. And 67% of all of the rental housing in the city is in fact medium to high density, but the majority of these were built 40 to 60 years ago, sort of going back to the 60s and 70s. So many of this housing stock is quite old, and there's a requirement to replenish it. And CMHC sees this as a requirement in Belleville that there be increased numbers of affordable housing units built for rent. And I also would mention that rents themselves are increasing in Quinte, and as with the pace of increased price in housing. So the project itself would be managed with a rental office that would be established on site to work with the various agencies to ensure that the units are in fact rented to the desired client group, and there would be on-site superintendent and management of the rental office, open 5 days a week and operating 9 to 5. Style Architect is the architect for the project. This is a copy of the site plan. It's very preliminary, but it was submitted for the purposes of the rezoning application. The primary access and exit would be at Station Street, which is an arterial street. I know that the owners have met with several of the surrounding neighbors, and there's been a big concern about traffic on Albion Street. And they at one time were proposing that all of the traffic traffic exit onto Albion Street. There's no requirement, as we understand it from the city, that this would occur, and we would propose to modify the plan so that the principal way of ingress and egress would be, in fact, from Station Street and a very secondary exit onto Albion Street. It would really be up to the City of Belleville staff to determine if the plans for rebuilding Albion Street will accommodate the exit, or if there is even, in fact, a need for an exit onto Albion Street. This may be something that could be determined. I know that there are folks here tonight that want to talk about their concerns about traffic, and certainly that's something that the owners are willing to work with the residents about. The parking itself is situated behind the building, next to the contractor's yard, and the property itself would be, the building would be set back about 22 meters from the limit of the contractor's yard, so it's positioned further and closer towards Station Street. There would be one parking space for every apartment unit, plus visitor parking, and that is situated primarily near Station Street. Also in orange on the slide is the sidewalk connection to Station Street and the transit stop. I've mentioned that there's good access to transit in the area, and as well it is adjacent to the Family Health Team office, and it's 800 meters to the downtown core. It's close to the Riverfront Trail and Memorial Park, so it checks a lot of the boxes in terms of good location within the core of the city. There's also outdoor amenity areas proposed or planned for the site, shown in enlargement here, with a community garden plot and a patio, gazebo, and barbecue area. This will be next to the medical center. The building elevation is shown here, prepared by Stahl Architect. It's 6 stories, 103 units in total, and it will be all concrete construction. It's not a stick-built building. The span of the building will be parallel to Station Street, as mentioned, and situated below the escarpment. The exterior of the building itself is stone and brick veneer, and it's been configured to maximize the views of the Moira River and the escarpment. The ground floor of the building would consist of common areas for the residents, and in those areas there would be storage lockers, sitting and meeting areas, and a community cafe. As well, there would be what's labeled as commercial space, about 886 square meters for a community partner agency or personal services, and that's roughly around 3,000 square feet. So these kinds of services are offered on the ground floor of the building with the lobby. This is a typical floor plan, and there is a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units. The research feasibility study showed that, in fact, there is a preference for couples to have 2 bedroom units, so that's why it's not all single 1 bedroom units. All of the units have balconies, and each floor, shown in the orange, would have dedicated laundry facilities for that floor. There were some engineering studies that were submitted as required by the city in support of the rezoning. And the first of these was a traffic impact study that was prepared by Greer Galloway. And it looked at the impact of the increased traffic on Station Street and how the intersection at Albion and Station Street would function as a result of that increased traffic. They look at what the level of service would be from that increased traffic. And they determined that the increased traffic would not warrant any left turn lane on Station Street, that there are adequate sight lines that are available to the driveways, and there potentially may be a requirement to reconfigure the transit stop. I've mentioned about the concerns on Albion Street and would defer to city staff as to how best to manage that traffic, but certainly we would be open to suggestions on how to minimize any impact on Albion Street. It's recognized that is a local street. Site servicing, there is adequate servicing for sanitary sewer and water that has been confirmed with city staff, and as well as other utilities and hydro. And there has been a record of site condition filed with the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. Stormwater management is a little bit more challenging for this site because there's a requirement to control the flows of stormwater and runoff to reduce the post-development flows to pre-development levels. So they can't increase any potential flooding downstream. And it's proposed to provide underground storage under the parking lots for this purpose. There is a requirement to look at expanding the volume of that underground storage, and the engineers will be doing that to satisfy the concerns of the city. This slide shows where 2 oil grit separators for quality control, which would be enhanced level 1, would be installed within the parking lot area. So both quantity and quality controls have to be satisfied. There is a condition of H symbol being placed on the property until such time as the stormwater management is resolved, and this would also be through the site plan approval process, which we're in agreement with. As mentioned, the property historically was zoned for industrial use. As well, there was a portion of it that was zoned for R4, residential 4th density. It is proposed to rezone all of the property to an R7, residential 7th density zone. So this shows the variation in the zoning. I'm not sure why it was split that way. It doesn't necessarily reflect 100% how the property was utilized, but in any event, this is the proposed zone change that's proposed. This is a summary of the zoning analysis, and there are a number of site-specific provisions within the R7 zone that are being proposed. The first is a provision to allow the community commercial service use on the ground floor. That's not allowed in the R7 zone. There's existing frontage on Station Street, which is slightly deficient, and that's based on the outline of the property. It's pre-existing condition. Then there's a requirement to allow for a reduced landscape area and at the same time slightly reduced parking area. We've provided a significant amount of information to the planning department about parking. Essentially, there'll be 1 parking space provided for each apartment plus visitor parking, and we provided the rationale for that. The city requires 1.25 parking spaces per residential unit. Within a core area, it's been determined most cities allow 1 or require 1 parking space per unit, plus there will be visitor parking provided in any event, and it's recognized that the community partner, there will be a mixed-use nature of the site, and in fact, some of the demands on the parking from the community partner use would be perhaps during the day, whereas the parking demand for residential would be offset more on weekends and evenings. I'll just provide a few closing remarks that the Magnolia Garden residence is proposed to provide affordable rental housing to older persons and seniors in the city centre. It is targeted, this specific site is targeted for intensification in the Riverview neighbourhood of the city centre. It is a redevelopment of a former vacant industrial site, and it will satisfy the requirements of the Ministry of Environment with respect to the redevelopment of that site for residential use. We have done a detailed review of the locational criteria, how the building is configured, height and density provisions within the Official Plan Amendment 23, and can advise that it conforms to the city centre land use policies, and finally that it's consistent with the 2014 provincial policy statement. And that's it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions before the...
Sure. Great presentation. So I'll reach out to Councillor Adrian Boyce.
Thanks, Ruth, for coming. And first of all, I want to say I agree 100% that we need affordable housing. But I've got some red flags on this particular item. My first one is I travel Albion Street almost every day. And I know when I'm going down Albion Street at many hours, I can't get onto Station Street left turn. If I want to head towards downtown, I've got to do a loop all the way up and around. And so I find that the area's traffic pattern right now, without 103 additional spaces, isn't sufficient. So I've got issues with that. I've got issues with 20% less green space that you're proposing. And I understand developers want to get as much into a space, but I mean, To give up green space, in my opinion, is not the option. And I'm concerned with the fact that or the company wants, instead of 161 spaces, they want 141 spaces. And I want to touch on the commercial development down on the main floor, because I understand there's 3,000 square feet of commercial development. Are any of those spaces going to be dedicated for doctors' offices, et cetera? And how much are you proposing for parking for those commercial developments on the first floor alone? So if you can answer why less green space?
Right.
Why the idea that you think that 141 spaces instead of 161, knowing that Albion Street, every time I use Albion Street, there's that one corner around it, and literally it's one of those dangerous corners I find heading towards Station, that if there can't be any parking on Albion Street. And so my concern is that you don't have enough parking. People are going to park on Albion Street, which, by the way, and as you know, is this year has been designated as a share the road bicycle lane. So we're going to be cramming. We're going to be cramming the people on. We're going to have what I think there's going to be parking on Albion Street, and then you're going to have people trying to bicycle and share the road with cars. It's already what I consider a substandard road, and so if you can answer why less parking spaces, why less green space for the neighborhood, and what's going to happen on the first floor for commercial development.
Okay. Traffic. I can't get specifically into the traffic impact study that was done by an engineering firm, Galloway. It's been reviewed or being reviewed by the city staff. I understood that they found the conclusions of that report to be acceptable, but I would defer to staff on that. I did touch on the concerns that we were aware of about the driveway onto Albion Street and the potential that that driveway, if required, be for pedestrian or emergency access only, if that would help to alleviate the concerns about traffic onto Albion Street, which I acknowledge it's a local street. The principal ingress and egress is to be from Station Street, which is an arterial street. So that was something that was looked at, Station Street being an arterial, that it was satisfactory, that driveway would function satisfactorily, and that they do a warrant study on whether a left turn is required. So I'd have to defer to the engineers on that and to staff and their review of the traffic impact study. With respect to the type of use, we're very specific about the type of use in commercial, and it was not to include a doctor's office. There already is a doctor's office immediately adjacent to the site. So there was no intention of, we're looking at community partners office type uses of 1 space per 28 square meters. And there is parking provided for that use, but albeit not to the full amount of the 1 per 28 square meters. Essentially, we provide enough parking for the residential. I guess it depends on whether how you want to slice it in terms of, there's a requirement for the parking for commercial as well as for the residential. We have, in our view, sufficient for the residential and commercial. We compared the parking that was, you've got to remember the city's zoning bylaw is from 1976, and this is a location in the downtown core where you have transit. It's affordable housing. Not everybody is going to have a vehicle, or it's anticipated would not have more than one vehicle. They'll be assigned, each occupant of each apartment will have 1 parking space. So in our research, we found that cities like Kingston and Port Hope, and I think Quinte West was another one of those, the standard of 1 parking space per apartment unit in the core area was a standard that was applied, because it's not a greenfield situation where you're going to have units where people are going to have more cars or increased demand. More people will be walking or taking transit. So we felt pretty comfortable with that, and we had some discussion with the city about that. So we want to restrict the commercial to a non-traffic generator type use, which is what is proposed, a community partner agency. And we also wanted to ensure that there was enough parking for each apartment unit plus visitors. So there is a detailed breakdown. I think it's in the addendum that was provided by one of my staff. Unfortunately, I don't have that right in front of me, but Carolyn Ross did provide an overview of that in the agenda package. And the green space, unfortunately, because there is such a driver of making sure there's sufficient parking, the green space suffers. And my comment back on that, we are providing a community garden and amenity area. It is almost directly across from the Riverfront Trail and Memorial Park. So there are parks in the area. Again, this zoning standard that was set out in the R7 zone would be more typically applied in a greenfield situation and not in a city center. So that would be my response with respect to the green space. We are providing outdoor amenity space, but the residents will also be able to quickly access the city parks and trails in the area. And there are also balconies on every apartment. So many of the residents will be using those balconies. I notice a lot of development, higher density, they're not building balconies, but this particular apartment building, the residents will have balconies. So they will be able to use that as part of their outdoor living area.
Well, I would respectfully suggest that the green space should never suffer. Rather,
Okay.
maybe the size of the building should be modified to accept the guidelines, because taking away that in the green space and then also taking away parking spaces, my concern, Ruth, is that people are going to be parked on those side streets that are narrow to begin with. Like, I mean, you know, the times that I'm driving up on some of those little side streets, like, you can't park on those ones safely. We'll be hearing from the neighbors, I know it. And second of all, if people attempt to park on Albion Street, it's a disaster waiting to happen. And making a left turn, it's already difficult to make a left turn off of Station Street, off of Albion. I can't imagine what these people in these apartments are going to do to try to get on to Station Street. I respectfully say that it's a great thing. I just think they've crammed way too much in the space. And those are my comments for now.
Thank you. Councillor Miller, you have the floor.
Thanks, Your Worship, and Councillor Boyce has covered off a lot of my concerns, and probably at the top of the list was the parking aspect of it. For the simple, well, not simple reason, in as much as we're talking about the core area, we're still talking about 800 meters from the actual downtown area. And from a planning perspective, I understand where we consider that typically city center, but it's not typical city center as we know it. So I'm not sure that the parking requirements, if you're living, for instance, in some of the new development in the immediate downtown area versus more of a residential area, would be one and the same. And when you look at, and Councillor Boyce talked about Albion Street quite a bit, but I know there's overflow from the doctor's offices that move over to Reed Street and Canafton Road, the old Canafton Road, and they get into that residential area. And to reduce the number of parking spaces by 20, to me, is a problem waiting to happen. And we've been dealing with parking areas throughout the city where on-street parking has become an issue to the point where we're issuing parking restrictions at different points throughout the day to try and protect residents, but at the same time we're also penalizing them because we don't allow any parking from time to time. So, I mean, to me, parking is the big issue. I mean, I like this concept. I like the use of infilling, or the concept of infilling. We have the needs, there's no question. One of the questions I did have, though, in as much as the market that you are targeting, there are 3-bedroom apartments. There are, I think, 4 of them? 3.
Yeah.
3-bedroom units.
Those are for family members of the owners. I asked the same question. And that's the response, is that it's local families, and they have parents that would like one of the units. So as a result of that, there are the I think there's 2 or 3 3-bedroom units.
So they would not necessarily be available for public rental?
Well, if they weren't occupying them, obviously they would be, but that was the background. It's a fairly minor part of the project, but I think there are 3 in total, so they're not even on every floor. But in terms of the parking, there are going to be enough, I feel there's going to be enough parking, based on the fact is that there's going to be enough visitor parking and parking for each occupant of every unit. The community partner, I think, is causing a lot of the pushback on that. It was thought that having the mixed use would be beneficial to the building and to the residents. It was not intended to create commercial space that would have undue impacts and create additional parking demand. So we looked at that carefully and submitted that as part of the planning rationale, and staff have reviewed it as well. So I keep coming back to this R7 zone is for greenfields from 1976. I just, we have tested the parking that we've provided here against what other cities are doing. And, this again is affordable housing. So I really feel that we've addressed that in our planning report. But I understand the concerns about Albion Street, and also there are the abilities to restrict parking on local streets. Obviously there wouldn't be parking on Station Street either. So as for the doctor's office overflowing, that's a problem that's specific to that building, and really this development can't be responsible for that. That's an enforcement issue related to the doctors. But doctors, obviously, the doctors' offices are high generators of parking demand, no question.
No, and I understand we're talking about a separate issue.
Yeah.
From responsibility perspective, but if you live in the neighborhood, you don't care where the overflow is coming from, whether
Right.
it's coming from the doctor's offices, whether it's coming from a new apartment building, whatever. All people know is that suddenly cars are getting jammed on relatively small streets. The only other thing, you mentioned that you haven't got back the traffic study yet, and again, I generally
It was
like
stormwater
this.
management that we're still working through.
And again, it's the configuration of the entire area. You have Albion Street, which is jutting out one way because it had to be rerouted, and then years ago, of course, Canopton Road was built farther to the east, Canopton Park Bay, but now we have two entrances there. We have Reed Street, not far away, Stoke Street. There's a lot of in and out in that very small area, and now we're looking at a driveway to a fairly highly populated, condensed area as well. So I'd be interested just to see whether or not that the traffic study will indicate any kind of an issue, because it's all in such a small, tight area. You have the extra turning lanes going on to Canopton Road from Station Street. There's left-hand turning lanes. There's a fair amount of traffic that really queues up there, especially at the higher traffic times of the day, in the morning, and again in the afternoon. It's not uncommon to see traffic backed right up past Memorial Park toward the downtown. So those are types of issues that I hope will be taken into consideration.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions from the floor? Any more questions for the floor? Thank you very much. So I'll reach out to anyone in the gallery. You're more than welcome to come to the podium and introduce yourself for the record, and please give us your 911 address. And you can speak on behalf of the application. You can speak in supporting the application, and you're more than welcome to speak if there's any issues or deficiencies with the application. Okay, yeah. Good afternoon, sir. And you need to press that little button. Thank you so much.
Can I talk?
You can talk, and you can introduce yourself and give us your 911 address.
My 911 address, I live in Roslyn, but I own property in Belleville.
And what is that address?
121 Station Street.
Thank you.
I got some, I'm not high-tech like her, but
Yeah, and first and last name, for the record.
yeah, just give me a second there. Tasso, I got it made up. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Joe Labarge, and I'm here tonight to speak on this application that's been brought before the Planning Committee. I'm the owner of 121 Station Street, a six-plex apartment complex on the corner of Stokes and Station, directly across from the Abigail's and the Lions Club. I have two brothers and their wives owning property directly to the south of mine. Along Stoke Street, a triplex, a single-family home known as 369 and 365 Stoke Street on the east side, directly abutting this parcel of land that we're here tonight. My brothers and I also own vacant land at the southeast end of Stoke Street, again abutting this land for rezoning. At this time, I would like to pass 2 pages of photos, numbered and documented, to help follow and see what my concerns are with the site plan that has been provided in this application. Like I said, I'm not as high-tech as, but I'm... Welcome back. Here I am. Just noticed you, man. I'm sorry.
Staff should have them too, of course. Well, we'll share and then we'll get more off you. And, can you, yeah, hand it that. Thanks, Paul.
If you follow me explaining and viewing the photos on page number 1, on the bottom left-hand corner, our first concern is raising of grade of elevation of this property, approximately 3.5 feet difference from the M1 zoning property known as 135 Station Street and 50 Albion, and the R4 zoning, a piece of land that was sovereigned from 125 and 127 Station Street in 2007. Nowhere on the site plan can we see any type of retaining walls for the north end, the west side, the south end, or of the proposed property. You can see by my photos the backfilling that has been done recently of the old block building that sat on the industrial site. They've started bringing it across on the lowland is what is happening. And the water that has already flooded my brother's property at 365 Stoke Street, he has been working with the city property standards bylaw officer, hopefully to get a solution to the problem. Meanwhile, he has to bring in fill to raise the elevation and try to prevent more damage to his property. They have a 2-year-old grandson they can't even let out in their yard for fear of him to get into that water hole just 10 feet off the property line. A foot of water, people. And you know how quick a kid can drown. There has never been any kind of fencing to secure this site. And you can see the top left and the bottom corner, what I'm trying to explain here. You can see I'm trying to get his fence across the back now to hopefully nothing happens. Most of the abutting property owners are very concerned. If this continues, will it lead for potential flooding and ground erosion of our properties? Another concern is there is no storm water plan plotted on the site plan. Catch basins for the water drainage for the winter time, for heavy rains. What's going to impact? There's none of that. Nothing to show snow removal. And our third concern is the parking space, asking to be lowered from the city requirements of 161 spaces to 141. I show you on page number 2 of my photos, top right corner, just last week, staff and patients parking cars along the west side of Reed Street, along Memorial Park, from the medical clinic. This is Monday to Friday during business hours. The only street I can see for off-site parking will be Albion Street, where people pulling out to get around cars, parking along curbs on a hill. This is an accident waiting to happen. I think back 2 months ago, I was here over another rezoning application, less than 200 feet from this subject property, Spring Ale Developments, 32-unit affordable housing. His site plan showed me more than enough parking spaces, catch basin where the water was going to go. His retaining walls were plotted on his plan. The applicant showed his retaining walls surrounding 3 sides of his property, going back to the west side, east side, and the north, right to the bottom of the hill, showing all about abutting property owners there will be no issue of ground erosion or water runoff. I wish I could stand here tonight with this present application and site plan and feel the same, but I can't. I can't. And at this time, I'd like to take a few moments to comment on the city staff report. I think you all have a copy of the city staff report that's been done by the city. Following along my photos on page number 2, I give you an aerial picture of the property on page number 2, so you can see. On page 3, under site review and description, go down to the land uses to the north. Staff makes references, open space and parkland, Memorial Park, directly across Station Street, Family Medical Center, 2.5-story apartment building, not making any references to my sixplex, the double red brick of 125, 127 Station Street, or 131 Station Street, a single-family home. All properties that have abutting property lines to this said property in this application. And they're not across the street. They're abutting. There's a big difference. Land uses to the east. Staff makes references, commercial, single, semi, and multi-residential dwellings. He is correct on that. Land uses to the south, again references the construction yard and warehouse and residential dwelling. Not a mention of the vacant land we own. Last description, the land uses to the west. City staff references community agency, Abigail's Learning Center, and Lions Club. Again, across a road, Stoke Street. Failed to mention 365, 369 Stoke Street, the east side of the road, single-family home, a triplex. And these two properties with abutting fence lines will have the most impact of this development. And you can see how this fill is coming in on their property. You can't raise property levels, people, 3 feet and expect water to run uphill. It's not going to run uphill. It's going in their yards, no doubt in my mind. And nothing has on these reports has said any different. As per their requirements of their parking spaces of 161, asking to be reduced to 141. Staff reports, notes, Kingston, Port Hope, and Quinte West all have a typical 1 parking space per unit within the downtown area. And that's on page number 6. The letter states, with the proposed 1.06 parking spaces per unit will be satisfactory given that the project will be marked for seniors. And that's right from the applicant's planning consultant. It goes on, the applicant's planning consultant also makes reference, and you can see this on page number 12 report, attachment number 4, correspondence regarding justification for reduced parking. It is intended that parking spaces will be leased out. Leased, people. This is affordable housing. So we're going to give you a cheap rent, but you're going to pay $500 or $600 for your parking space. You want a parking space? We're going to pay $500 or $600. And those tenants that want a space, a particular space, will then be assigned a parking spot. I find this approach very odd because this is supposed to be affordable housing for 50-year-olds and older seniors. But to get around providing required parking spaces for the city of 161 spaces, if we charge or ask the seniors to pay more, somehow this will hopefully reduce the parking spaces. So the applicant only will need is 141 spaces for this development. Finally, in the report, concerning stormwater management, page number 7, this is a major concern for all the property owners and should have been addressed on this application and the site plan before tonight. Applicant's engineer will be addressing these questions, and that's what they state, these questions forthcoming in the near future. But they're asking you to vote on it tonight, people. You're going to vote on it tonight. But it's going to be forthcoming. I would like to thank the committee members for allowing me to voice my concern as a property owner. And we will be most affected, and already have. Water runoff flooding in my brother's property at 365 Stoke Street, and the pictures could clearly show. My brothers and I and myself would like to see development on this property, for it would only enhance our downtown core. And we think affordable housing for seniors is needed. And we believe somehow fine-tuning of this application to meet all concerns regarding grade elevation, the backfilling of the lowland, retaining walls, it should be required, stormwater management, and the parking issue. So all neighboring property owners could have peace of mind would be greatly appreciated by all. Thanks again. If you have any questions.
Thank you very much. Great presentation.
Thanks.
But we should make sure that the applicant gets a copy of what you gave us. So the presenter should, if you have an extra one, we'll make sure that Mrs. Althouse gets
Well,
one of these.
I hope there's an extra one there, because I thought I printed enough one
No,
off.
that's fine. Just want to let you know. So, great presentation.
Thanks.
Any questions from the floor? Any questions from the floor? Okay,
Nothing.
thank you very much.
Okay.
Great. Thank you very much, Joe.
Thank
Muchly
you.
appreciated.
Yeah, thank you again
Thank you.
for your time.
No, thank you for your time. Any more questions from the floor? You're more than welcome. Hello, how are you? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you. My name is Brenda Adams Moncaster, and I own property at 125 Station Street, so that's just abutting this new proposed development on the north side.
Right. Gotcha.
I received the notice, thank you, from the city. Not once has the developer reached out to myself, and when I did contact them, they said I wasn't home. That may be, but sometimes you should leave a card. I object to reducing the green space, and my concern is the winter snow removal issues and the runoff. And tonight, from the presentation, I also see that this AS2 oil grit separator is like right in my backyard, something that I think I'm concerned about. I'm concerned also about having a sixth-floor building in my backyard, which I heard tonight is all going to have balconies, so every window that I have on my south side is now going to have a lot of eyes. I also have concern about runoff and erosion from the parking, from the snow removal, from where is that water going, and as Joe mentioned, you know, the elevation, so I have some concerns about that. And I do have a really old historical building that might not be on the historical list, but we've lovingly repaired and brought to a really nice state. I think those are my first little bits. So,
Okay. No, thank you.
Thank you.
And we're taking all this info, and we'll make sure that staff gets it. So, but I just want to ask the floor if they have any questions for you. Any
Sure.
Any questions at all for Brenda? No, seeing none. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience or the gallery that would like to speak on this application, either supporting it or not supporting it? Okay. Oh, yes, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
My name is Alex Shatford. I live in the condominiums on Albion, 35 Albion. We personally, my wife and I, we are in favor of this development because I think all councillors are aware that that's a lot that has sat empty for a long time. But we also have the same concerns with traffic on Albion.
Sure.
And the other concern, I don't know who's responsible for that lot right now to cut the grass right next to Albion, adjacent to the clinic. The car that I have, the grass is tall enough, it does destroy your sight line for traffic coming off the station up Albion. They do come at a high rate of speed around that corner. Now the owners did come and spoke to my wife and I, and they made a comment the city had made a request to leave land to them for realignment of Albion, and I haven't heard that mentioned.
Okay.
Is anyone here aware of that?
Well, we'll get you an answer on that one right now. So staff-wise, any correspondence with the applicant about land for Albion Street? No. Good question. The answer is no. No communication is
I think it would be better if that curve could be not as, I'm not sure the proper language is,
Sure.
but more of a gentle curve, so that like when we pull out of our condominium complex, you can see traffic coming uphill.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the answer is to control the speed. And I'm afraid if you repair Albion as it needs to be repaired, it's going to make them go even faster.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Sir, I'm just going to ask the floor if they have any questions for you. Anyone have any questions for the gentleman? No? Thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank
it. Have a great afternoon. Okay, anyone else from the gallery want to comment? I see a hand. Oh, yes, Ruth. Sorry, I was going to ask for you to come back. So we should get you a copy of this.
I just wanted to answer a few questions or make a few comments about not all of the presentation. I didn't see Mr. Labarge's pictures, and we'll have to take a look at that. I do know that the owners have met with him and his brothers. I know for sure with his brothers. But perhaps an unfortunate choice of words in the correspondence back through to Steve Ashton was that the parking spaces will be allocated to each tenant. They won't be leased. I just wanted to clarify that. They're not charging for parking. And I did want to clarify about the oil grit separator, and in fact all of the stormwater management, everything is underground. The oil grit separator helps to separate the sediment that comes off parking lots, and it's a requirement that it essentially takes those contaminants and then they're cleaned out so that the stormwater itself doesn't then all of those contaminants don't dump into the river. So essentially it's an on-site quality control that's underground under the parking lot, and it's intended to help clean up the rainfall. Same with the stormwater itself. There is a detailed stormwater plan that will be required before site plan approval, and all of the excess runoff from the site would be stored underground. There's a very detailed stormwater plan that was submitted with the applications, and it was prepared by Galloway, and all of the runoff from the site is required to be contained in this underground storage, and it is a technique used where we don't have stormwater ponds. So I just wanted to clarify that there has been a very detailed stormwater plan submitted, and the issue now is the storm event, and as a result of the concern about what storm event is used to control the surplus runoff, they have to look at providing more storage on the site, possibly underground within the parking lot. So these giant storage chambers, the stormwater report provides that sort of detail of what they look like, but it's not something that people would be able to see from the street. And they're quite common in commercial and in higher density projects where there isn't a stormwater pond that you can direct the flow to. So I just wanted to clarify that. I think that perhaps covers just wanted to make some clarification on those points.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me. Thank you very much. Okay, seeing no more residents going to the podium, I apologize. Sorry, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Bartolome Matamoros. My address is 131 Station Street.
121 Station?
31.
131. Thank you, sir. Can I ask you one more? What was your first name again? I'm so sorry.
My name is Bartolome Matamoros.
Thank you. Okay, sir, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry because I don't speak English very well.
It's okay, take your time.
But I get to less than 40% green space and the additional traffic as well as the water erosion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming.
Thank you.
Any more guests in the audience like to speak on the application, either for or against? Okay, seeing none now, I just need a motion to refer it to the PAC meeting so we can ask staff. Moved by Councillor Boyce, second by Councillor Miller. All in favor? All opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, we have another one before us. On my agenda is 3.2, proposed draft plan, subdivision and proposed amendment, the zoning bylaw number 10-248. as amended. 645 Sydney Street, Part 1 and 4, Plan 21R 17326, City of Belleville, County of Hastings. It's the file number before you, which is B77, 10512-12T, and 18002. And the applicant owner is 2579024 Ontario Inc., care of Mike D. Anglio, and the agent is RFA Planning Consultant. So I need a motion to get that on the floor. Is that? No, I don't. Okay, thank you very much. So we have our second application before us. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on the second application, which refers to 645? Oh, staff, I apologize. Thank you. Well, I'm a rookie, First time. Okay, I'll let staff introduce the application.
Thank you, Chair. The application is for a combination of a zoning bylaw amendment and a draft plan of subdivision application. The proposal covers land on the west side of Sydney Street, north of Tracy Street, and south of the power corridor. That's approximately 1.2 hectares in size. The land is currently vacant, undeveloped, grass with some vegetation, some trees on it. And it is designated residential land use under the city's official plan, and currently zoned residential holding with O3 open space zoning on the power corridor that runs through the property. The proposal is for a development containing 9 blocks that could be developed into 51 street townhouse units. And there's also a proposal for an O1 open space block that could be used as a parkette. The subject property would be accessed through the extension of Adrian Street going north from Tracy Street, and would contain an internal road that would then have a cul-de-sac at either end. And as well, the proposal includes a proposal to extend the multi-use trail from the west side of the property by the Stormwater Management Facility across to Sydney Street. And that's an overview.
Thank you. So can you get it on the Jumbotron for us so the audience in the gallery can see it? Thank you. And now I'll reach out to anyone in the audience. Ruth, you're more than welcome to come and speak on behalf of the application.
I have another presentation here for this application.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, and we're shifting gears a little bit here to 645 Sydney Street, a project that's been has become known as Holly Landing. The site is located on Sydney Street and Tracy Street. It's about 5.7 acres or 2.3 hectares. It has 88 meters of frontage onto Sydney Street, and it also fronts onto an unopened road allowance on Adrian Street. It's a vacant property. We have not found that it's ever been developed in the past, so it's a long vacant site in the city of Belleville. Some slides here from several months ago when it was dreary and gray of the property and the surrounding land uses. The property itself on the southern limit backs onto existing homes on Tracy Street, and the site itself is open and level with the hydro corridor to the north that extends across the city, traveling in an east-west direction. And some of these pictures show that. On the south side of the unopened road allowance, there's a photo of Adrian Street that extends off of Tracy Park Drive as it exists today. To the north is a large vacant commercial site, and the commercial use is along Bell Boulevard. And along on the east side of the property is what's known as the Lemoyne Street Stormwater Management Facility. That pond was constructed by the city with the cost sharing from all the landowners on Bell Boulevard to allow the Bell Boulevard corridor to be developed. So this property actually at one time included the land with the pond. Mr. Hawley owned it, and he deeded the land for the Lemoyne Street Stormwater Management Facility, and this site itself was, although designated residential, not commercial, was factored in the calculations for the stormwater management facility at that time. But that was done about 25 years ago. That pond was actually, it was one of the first of its kind in the city, where the landowners worked together and developed the swim facility. Without that, none of the development on the Bell Boulevard could happen. So this is an extract of the actual draft plan of subdivision that is proposed for the site. And we've had consultation meetings with city staff. I should mention Adam Wilson from Ainley Group is here tonight. With Adam, we've met with city staff on several occasions, and initially we're looking at considering the access onto Sydney Street. And the City Engineering Department would not allow an entrance onto Sydney Street, and they directed us to provide an access from the existing road allowance at Adrian Street that is unopened. And this would then connect to a new internal Street A that's shown on the draft plan. The breakdown of the various parcels of the draft plan are shown on the chart at the bottom. There are 9 blocks proposed for 51 townhouse units, freehold units. So those blocks are further subdivided after the plan is registered and the foundations are constructed for each block of townhouse units. Surprisingly, only half of the site is active development for the residential use. Because of the extent of land that is occupied by the hydro easement, as well as the amount of road that's proposed, there's the density itself, it is categorized as medium density on a net basis, but if we were to include those, the density would be significantly lower. There is a park block that's proposed on Block 11, and it will, at some point, intended to link to the future multipurpose trail. This is a copy of the development site plan, and we prepare this so that it can help describe how the subdivision will look and how it will meet zoning criteria of the city. And as mentioned, Adrian Street would be extended to connect to Tracy Street, which is a collector road. And so we've drawn that on the development site plan so you could envision what that might look like. And there would be sidewalks on one side of Adrian Street. We've proposed it on the west side, as well as internal to the subdivision on the north side. And that sidewalk is shown connecting to the city's multipurpose trail, which is along the northern limit of the development site plan. There are 2 cul-de-sac bulbs on either end, and on one of them we're proposing some visitor parking next to the parkland. And as the building footprints are shown on the site plan in yellow with the attached garages and driveways. Now, these are conceptual, but they're for the purposes of looking at zoning provisions and conformity to the zoning. There's a requirement for privacy fencing next to the hydro easement, as well as on Sydney Street and along the rear lots backing onto the homes on Tracy Street. The parkette is shown with the playground. It is approximately 2.5% of the overall land, and we've laid out the subdivision to meet the requirements of the R5-31 zone, which is also subject to this submission, the rezoning. We had a neighborhood meeting with the residents. Now, I'm not sure if we reached everybody certainly was sent a notice of the neighborhood meeting. We held it at the Parkdale Community Center a week ago, and we had at least 12 folks came out, and we had an opportunity to describe the project and discuss what their concerns would be. And I provided a summary of that neighborhood meeting in your agenda package, and there were 3 main concerns. concerns. The first was impact on privacy and requirements for buffers. The second one was the ability of the stormwater pond to take the increased runoff from this project, and just runoff questions in general. And the third was the potential impact on Tracy Street of the increased traffic. So those were the three main concerns, and the purpose of this slide is to show you discussions we had with the neighbors who were, I would argue, most concerned about the privacy from their backyards towards the north into the subdivision. And most of the folks that were there lived on Tracy Street. Interesting to note, these lots were created a long time ago, and they have very deep backyards. I've added what those typical setbacks are, ranging from 35 up to 50 meters. So they have 4 to 6 times the backyards that you might find elsewhere in the city. We talked about the requirements that they have and concerns they have about privacy. So in the pinky red color, we've shown along the south property lines buffers that would be proposed either in the form of privacy fencing or in combination with preserving some of the existing tree buffer that's there. And the engineer will be going out on the site and meeting with the residents. His information, contact information was provided, and we'll be surveying where that tree buffer is now and looking at how much of it is practical to be preserved, how much of it's on the landowners, the neighbors' land versus on the subject lands. And there is a condition of draft approval that this privacy fencing and or buffer be included as a condition of draft approval. And we've also shown privacy fencing to the rear of the existing homes that are fronting onto the unopened road allowance, so that those folks that have enjoyed those property owners have enjoyed having no, essential complete privacy there. Now with the city's with the requirement to open that unopened road allowance to provide for some privacy along their rear, it's called an exterior side yard. So that is those areas that extend down on the site plan. So there were both servicing studies and stormwater management reports filed with this submission for draft plan approval. And the servicing for water and sanitary sewer would be out through to Sydney Street, and the stormwater management would be a connection to the existing Lemoyne Street stormwater management pond. That, as I've mentioned, this facility was sized to receive the runoff from these lands. And there would also be rear yard catch basins to collect the drainage along the backs of the lots, and that would direct all of the drainage from this subdivision into that storm pond. And there would be, of course, erosion and sediment controls included. The internal street would be built to city standards as a public street by the developer. It's a 20-meter wide road allowance, and the cul-de-sacs have all been designed with a turning radius as set out in the city's guidelines, with full curb gutter, street lights, and utilities. These are some of the elevations that were shared last week with the neighbors, prepared by SES Drafting and Design from Sterling. And they would be 2-story units ranging in size from 1,580 to 2,600 square feet. They all have attached garages. They've done some marketing studies, the owners have, and have found there's a strong market demand for these types of units. They would all have 3 bedrooms with a full basement and masonry partition walls between the units. These are not affordable units, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. These are some other elevations of the front and rear of the townhouse blocks. And within the main floor plans, this slide shows the garages, and all of the garages are going to be large enough to have both storage and park a car, and there are 2-car garages at the end of the blocks. So there was sensitivity to, sometimes with the townhouse developments, there's concern that people aren't using their garages because they're simply not big enough. And certainly the design here has tried to factor in that these garages will have room for both storage and for parking cars. I've also mentioned there will be some visitor parking proposed as well. This is the proposed zoning bylaw amendment that accompanied the draft plan of subdivision application, and it is proposed to zone the Parkette to an O1 zone and the balance of the subdivision to an R5-31 zone, and that's a zone that already exists in the city for freehold two-story townhouses. And just very briefly, in closing, that we have met all of the criteria for medium-density townhouse development in the Belleville official plan. We have a detailed planning report that I appreciate you haven't seen, but it goes through all of those criteria in some detail. And we're confident that the subdivision's feasible from a servicing perspective, that we satisfy the requirements of the official plan, and it's consistent with the provincial policy statement. And as well, there's a criteria or checklist in the Planning Act that has to be considered when approving subdivisions, and we've provided some information in our planning report about how Section 3124 of the Planning Act has been addressed in the submission. Thank you.
Great presentation, thank you. So I'll get some questions from the floor. I'll acknowledge Councillor Boyce. He had his hand up. Go ahead, sir.
Thanks, Ruth. Certainly enough parking in this one. I've got no issues with that. My one question is, have you had an opportunity to see the letter we received today from the consultants for, I guess, Loblaws Company?
No, it hasn't been provided to us.
So under process, we're going to bring that forward under correspondence at the PAC meeting.
Okay.
We'll get our copy right now.
Okay,
perfect. Because it's essentially there, and I see that I think it's going to be addressed as well already. But they're asking that blocks 1 to 4 and 5 have require a 1.8 meter high board-on-board privacy fence along the northern boundary of blocks 1 to 4 and along the eastern boundary of blocks 4 to 5.
I think we've shown that on the plan there. I've just put up the setbacks slide.
Yeah, and I think the east side, I believe, of 4 and 5, they were asking for it. I mean, you'll receive the letter then.
Okay.
But I think the only part that you may be missing is the east side of 4 and 5, where they're asking for the fencing to be erected. But are you also saying, and I think it's a great idea, the pink part would be fencing, and then you would have like an open space as well, kind of a buffer area?
The open
That's a good idea.
To the north of the subdivision block there, where the townhouse units are, that's the hydro easement. So that is going to be like an open space, as much like as it exists now. The city plans to extend that multipurpose trail, so we've shown that on our site plan to match up with the existing multipurpose trail that's behind the Lemoyne Street pond. And there would be a requirement for fencing next to the storm pond. I think the fence is already there. So I didn't address that specifically. I guess it would be whether you need both a chain link fence plus then another privacy fence. That's kind of a detail that we could look at. I think you're referring to the east side of where the townhouse units are. Yeah.
Okay. Got another follow-up question? She's got one. Yeah.
Yes, I have a copy. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Miller, you're in the queue.
Thanks. Just one question. What are the price points for these?
I think it's around in the low 400s.
Thank you.
Any more questions from the floor? I think I just have a couple here. I'm seeing a sidewalk on the north side. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, that's good. And then you were also kind enough in this design to show visitors parking, which is really nice to see.
If the city will be agreeable to it.
Well, yeah, well, obviously communication is important. And what we're finding, past practice has been, we're very excited about these developments, but we're also seeing, like in your rendition, I know it's just a rendition, so I fully respect that. And I don't want to catch you by surprise. For instance, on page 6 or 7, townhouse elevations are very pretty, very nice. But what we're finding is the family that makes the purchase has 3 or 4 vehicles. And so does he and she's next door neighbors, both sides. And now we have 9 vehicles. So you can see, and who they call? They call elected officials. You know, my kids want to play on the road. We want it to be safe. We have all these cars. So you've done a nice job in making an application to get some off-site parking. So it's a
Yeah,
good start.
That's a good point, and it is a common problem that, not just in townhouses, but in a lot of homes now, in new subdivisions, people aren't parking their car in them, they're just filling it full of stuff.
Yeah.
And then their cars end up out on the driveways and on the streets, so we're aware that that's a challenge regardless of the type of housing.
Okay, that's all I had. Any more questions from the floor? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this application, supporting it, or having any questions for us? Good afternoon. How are you today? Just hit that little button, there you go, and you can pull that down.
My name's Alwyn Sherman, and I lived on Adrian Street for 50 years. So I'm the senior around there. I want to know why they can't put a street out to Bell Boulevard. You're going to build houses, why don't you put the street out?
Okay, I'll get you an answer for that. And you're talking about the street going to Sydney Street so they can go north and
take some of the transit out to Bell Boulevard instead of it all coming back to Tracy and our little Adrian Street.
Oh, I see. Okay, so I'll ask staff. Obviously, the inquiry is to take that street straight north. That's what you're inquiring, correct?
I'm just asking.
Okay. Staff, you have the floor.
I can answer if you want. Well, I think the number one reason is that this development is the owners own the land that's shown on the picture on the screen. They don't own the land further north, so they have no way of getting to Bell Boulevard. Even if they did, I'm not sure you want a connection from Bell Boulevard down to Tracy Street and Adrian Street. It might bring more traffic in than it would take off.
Okay. A very good question. Thank you very much. Any more questions? Yep, go ahead. Good afternoon. Can you hit that little button, please? And could you introduce yourself?
My name is Ivan. I live with we own a house with my parents.
Sure.
It's 12 Adrian Street. And actually, it concerns me that the people that made this project never informed us of any of this. And this is the first meeting that we can visit. So none of our concerns have been even considered before this, or so I think. So, which are, well, plenty, but the biggest one is the traffic. The traffic that this will create down to our small Adrian Street, a street that doesn't even have a sidewalk. So at night, people are walking their dogs, going around with their kids, just doing everyday stuff, and we're talking about 51 condos. If we even take conservative values of 2 cars per condo, without guests or anyone else visiting the area, that creates a whole new traffic flow which was not accounted for on our little street. That hasn't been resurfaced in 20 years. Doesn't have curbs, doesn't have sidewalks, doesn't have anything. So that's my biggest concern. Well, safety and everything else involved with that.
Of course. Yep. Is there any questions from the floor? So can I just affirm, your residence is south of Tracy on Adrian?
We are on Adrian,
okay,
12 Adrian Street.
So that, well, I'm looking at the map, and I apologize. You're south of Tracy Street, right?
Yeah.
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 So you're thinking that there's going to be an abundance of traffic on that street now?
Yeah, a lot more.
Okay, so my understanding would be, and I'll stand to be corrected, you'll probably get substantial more healthy traffic on Tracy Street going east and west into the new development to the north rather than coming from the south.
True, but there's still traffic going from Maple through Adrian Street onto the new addition of Adrian to the condos and back. It will be used more for transit.
Okay. You mean it for our public transit?
No, not
for cars.
For cars going back and forth.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And more people going through, so no sidewalks, and mainly that. And I had a concern about water and where all the water is going to go because of the footprint of all the houses. It's a very large development
like normally I looked around other cul-de-sacs and small streets, usually it's like 12, 15 small houses. It's not 50 complexes creating all this
Abundance of water.
abundance of water. And this whole pond, it's the whole area that's being developed, it sort of acts as a collector for water in spring. Like, you notice that there's usually a foot of water in the field, and just it doesn't drain to the lake. So I'm concerned that when it does drain to the lake, will it not flood the basements and raise the groundwater of houses that are adjacent to the properties?
Okay, and I'll get your staff to give you a technical answer to that, okay?
Yeah,
So staff,
please.
would you be more than happy to respond to that?
Certainly, yes. So the site would be designed in terms of modern engineering practices in terms of stormwater management. And I know our staff has had a look already at a study that was presented in association with this development. They've made some comments looking back to confirm that the pond that's there now will be adequate for the flows that would come off. But essentially, in terms of our development, we would be ensuring that it was done in such a way that the flow coming off the site did not increase over what it is now.
So we've got that one covered for you.
Yeah, and just wondering, why is it not possible to connect this new Adrian addition back onto Sydney Street instead of having it all rounded off and all the traffic going back to Tracy, if all this traffic is going to go back to Sydney anyways?
Okay, we'll get you a technical answer for that also. It's a very good question.
Yes, so we've looked at that with our engineering people, and they have a lot of concerns about taking a road out onto Sydney Street because of how busy a street it is already and the level of safety there. Tracy Street in our official plan is also designated as a collector road, which is intended to collect traffic and safely feed it out onto the larger streets like Sydney. And so for that reason, engineering recommended that we extend or ask the developer to extend and connect to Adrian rather than going straight out onto Sydney.
Okay.
Okay.
While I'm up here, can I ask a question? Is there a way to limit traffic from the new development going back into Adrian Street? Make it so you can only turn right or left going from the new development, so that the traffic is always going onto Tracy and never going through Adrian Street?
I think it's something that would have to be looked at through the traffic study, I guess. I mean, essentially, when people are coming out of the development, I mean, I would see, unless they were local traffic, at least from my perspective, if I was coming out, I would want to get to the bigger road. And so, I mean, my instinct would be to turn one way or the other. I don't see a lot of cut-through traffic going, but again, that's something that would be looked at through the traffic study, I'm sure.
And we have a question here for you, sir. Ivan, one second. Councillor Boyce.
Actually, our delegation has spoke about the idea of a sidewalk on Adrian Street and the lack of a sidewalk south of Tracy Street on Adrian Street. Has there been discussion, because I agree, there's going to be at least 100 cars, probably conservatively, probably more. And some may turn down Adrian Street, and it's always good to have at least one side of the street on a sidewalk. Has there been any discussion with residents at any time about...
Not with us.
No, I mean, has there been any discussion through staff? Has staff discussed the idea of sidewalks on Adrian at any point in time?
Go ahead.
Through the chair, Councillor Boyce, no. I mean, Adrian is like a lot of streets in a lot of parts of the city that have no sidewalks. So if you install a sidewalk on Adrian Street, you've dealt with Adrian Street, but that street ends at Maple where there are no sidewalks, so you're putting people onto the street there. There's you know, every year the city looks at streets where we're resurfacing and reconstructing and adding sidewalks in where we can, and those streets get addressed at that time. But there's certainly been no discussion with this development looking at Adrian Street south of Tracy Street. Staff, as Greg has mentioned, we anticipate the vast majority, if not all, the traffic coming and going from that will use Tracy Street and not Adrian Street south of Tracy Street.
Just regardless, though, like, I mean, while we're on that discussion, I think, I would certainly hope that staff in the very near future look at that area, and you mentioned Maple Street as well, and it shows a lack of sidewalks and just for pedestrian safety and things, and so I'm hoping that staff take that block of area in this area, and we'll look at the idea of sidewalks. As I know council put money towards, at their last budget, towards a block of sidewalk, and they've probably already been designated, but I mean, for the next budget, just to examine this particular area, and we see a lot more pedestrians nowadays, and, you know, we see a lot more bicyclists, and we see a lot more of these things, so whether it's a bicycle path, I mean, whether it's a multi-purpose trail instead of a sidewalk, you know, that's something in that area we need to look at, regardless of whether or not this new development occurs or not. We need to look at sidewalks.
Thank you. Councillor Miller?
Well, it's just, if we're going to look at sidewalks, and I'm fine with that, obviously, for pedestrian safety, but the experience that we've had from time to time when we have attempted to provide sidewalks on city streets that don't have them, and the pushback from residents who don't want the driveways cut and reduced because suddenly now there's a sidewalk running through it, that would certainly have to be a discussion with people who live there to see if they really do want it, and what side of the street, and so on. There is another discussion to come out of providing sidewalks, because not everybody's in favor of them when their property is going to be affected.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely, but I mean, and we've always done that, whether, you know, whatever street it is, we go to the owners of the homes, so we don't randomly put sidewalks in unless we've discussed. And so I'm just hoping that we do have that discussion.
We'll do that at the council floor. Any more questions for the gentleman, for Ivan?
I would just like to add on the condition of Adrian Street. As far as the asphalt is concerned, it's in pretty bad condition. And not only sidewalks, we don't have curbs, we don't have storm drainage. It's a very basic street. It's like almost a gravel road at this point, because there's people who fill potholes in, but that only lasts for 2-3 months. And like last year, they were filling them into, like, when it was raining, so it was gone like that. So
on the municipality side, we would love to have every single road in the corporation with new asphalt and curbs and all the infrastructure amenities. We would love to do that. But ultimately, not sometimes, all the time, it's driven by economic resources.
Yeah.
So this council has given staff the direction. They've created a needs assessment on roads, and they go down each and every road. They walk it, they identify it, and we keep going down the queue. It happened to have Councillor Carr in the audience. He's brought forward numbers of times we put more outreach money for reconstruction of roads, so we're getting there. I have to apologize, Adrian hasn't been done, but you have our word. As a council, we're doing the best we can with the resources we have. That's on the municipality side. On the planning side, we're looking at this one here right now, and obviously Councillor Miller and Councillor Boyce have got the juices flowing on getting some direction on some sidewalks in the future.
I understand. That's just as a matter of this project.
No, I fully respect it. Thanks so much.
Add to it.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Good afternoon. I will be short. My name is Olga Filipova, and I just want to tell you, I'm speaking on behalf of my husband and myself. I live on that small Adrian Street, which is 11 houses.
Yep.
And that's the first meeting which we got a letter about that huge project. And we are not impressed about that project at all. It's pollution, it's noise, it's all that activity which we don't appreciate. We bought our house seeing that it's nice, quiet, peaceful environment. And our small street is not ready, absolutely not ready for that great project. And we would suggest to eliminate that number from 51 units to something less, to leave some green area. There is shopping area there. All the stores are there. All the people are already there, and you want to put now all the traffic around us, that will be disaster for us living there nicely, friendly, quietly, clean. It will be destroyed from that project. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please help us try to avoid our disappointment with that project. We realize it's a lot of money, 400,000 per one unit, 51 unit, we can multiply that, but it's not all about money. It's about happiness for the citizens of beautiful city Belleville.
Thank you.
We appreciate your attention.
No,
Thank you.
No, thank you for your time. Any more people in the gallery that would like to speak on the application? Anyone else in the gallery that would like to speak on the application? Hello. How are you?
Nervous.
No, don't be nervous. Hopefully
Hi.
we've created an environment where you're comfortable. A little introduction would be nice, and then just an address, and we're good to go.
Bonnie Blaine, 48 Tracy Street.
Thank you.
And first of all, I would like to say, a rising tide raises all boats. I commend these young gentlemen for taking pride in Belleville and wanting to invest in our city. And I do believe we need housing. Of course, our concern is always traffic. At the present time, Tracy Street is a main artery, and it does become very congested. We have school buses, city buses, and we're the newbies on the street, but what we have noticed is that when the 401 has a major accident and it's closed, they divert the traffic. Where would that be? Whatever's.
It's called an EDA, Emergency
Whatever
Detour
ramp.
Road. Yeah, EDR.
And they use Tracy Street as the main artery to, yeah, they do, yeah, they'll put them down there.
Yeah, you know what, I would never challenge you on that, but what's happening, what we're finding is all municipalities have partnered with the MTO and created these EDRs. What happens is drivers in mostly vehicles have, you know where I'm going with GPS, and they like to get to where they're going as the crow flies. So I'm not challenging you, you're 100% right, but it is happening. We have also partnered with the MTO, and we have designated areas. If God forbid there's a tragic accident on the 401 and the OPP and the MTO close it, they have designated areas to go. But the drivers don't. They Google on their phones and on their GPSs, and they know how to get somewhere a little quicker, and they take advantage of your ambiance of your home. So I sincerely apologize about that.
I know, it's so beautiful. Anyway, that was our concern,
Sure.
that, traffic. And right now, there is no parking restriction on the north side of the street. And we would like to see if that would remain that way.
Okay.
And the other thing was that stormwater management. And I did go to the other meeting, and they did satisfy that the pond has had a 100-year study and that things are going to go great. So we back onto the pond. So that would be our concern, that certainly that pond will keep the water off of our lot.
Yep.
Not that we use it, but and we were under the understanding that the commercial properties in the area actually paid to have that pond put in there. And are they aware that the pond, can other people use the storm management to put into that pond?
Okay, we'll get you that answer. Did you hear that question, sir?
The pond, as Ruth mentioned at the beginning, was done in the mid-90s, and this particular property where these townhouses are proposed was the property that gave up the land for the pond. So as part of that arrangement, their property was included in that agreement. So it's not just the commercial properties, but it's also this one that contribute to that pond, that contributes stormwater to that pond.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay,
Thank you
thank
very
you. Can
much.
I ask if we have any questions for you? No, for you. Yeah, well, let's just try it, see how we make out. Well, let's just try it. Now, Councilor Miller has a
The only
question.
question, and I think I heard you say, you did attend a meeting for this then?
Yes, we did, yes.
Okay, and your property on Tracy, would that be right in the vicinity of the proposed development? Or are you
We're
farther?
back onto the pond.
You're back
So,
on?
Yep.
Okay.
So our main concern would be really the traffic, and if people are going to use both sides of even Tracy to,
No, I'm just happy to hear
Parking's
that you were invited to the meeting. I'm a bit concerned when people weren't aware that there was a meeting, so I'm glad that you were.
we
Okay.
were.
Thank you very much.
And we'll have one more question for you, Mr. Joyce.
Actually, just to follow up to Councilor Miller through the chair to staff, then, was the designation for advising the residents then Tracy? Is that anything below Tracy then on Adrian not advised? It appears that's the case.
Good question.
Through the chair to Mr. Joyce, the circulation radius under the Planning Act requires a circulation distance of 120 meters from the subject property, so all properties within that receive notice from the city.
Excellent, thank you very much. Okay, we have any more people in the audience that would like to speak on the application? Good afternoon, sir. Yeah, no worries, no, it's all good.
Push the button?
Yes, sir.
Sorry.
Oh, thank you.
My name is Al Bland. I'm at 48 Tracy Street as well. My concern is the storm sewer, because right now, in the springtime, myself and I know my neighbor, we're getting approximately 1.5 foot of water at the back end of our yard. So with the storm sewer being right behind us, why are we getting that amount of water? We're not getting any in the house, praise God. We don't have a whatever you call it, sump pump. We don't have a sump pump. I don't know about my neighbors, but so far we don't have any problems in our basement. But the back end of our yard, like I say, from our fence, which is part of the storm sewer, up to maybe about 15, 20 feet, there's anywhere from 1 foot up to whatever of water.
Okay.
And that's almost the full width of our yard, which is a little over 100 feet. So like I say, our neighbor's doing the same.
Okay, thank you very
So
much.
it's just the storm sewer I'm concerned
No,
about.
muchly I wrote that down earlier, thank you. Okay, yes, sir, how are you?
Good day, Jason Sherry, 42 Tracy. My property butts up with a gentleman that was just speaking about the water. That was one of our concerns, was the water in our backyard. But going through the town hall meeting, the developers, they did state that they were going to put a ditch along the back to suck the water up. That put my concern to the wayside at that point, so I was happy. And I went into that town hall meeting with great objections. The only thing that concerns me now is just the traffic, but I do say thank you to the gentleman who did put the proposal in for the subdivision, because anything we've asked, they've been more than happy to give us everything we've asked for. So I thought somebody would like to say something good about them.
Thank you. No, muchly appreciated. Good news is always good news. Okay, so we have any more people in the audience that would like to speak on the application? Supporting it? Not supporting it? I see a hand there. Good afternoon, Ruth.
Just a quick point of clarification, and yes, we held our own neighborhood town hall meeting, and the way that we set up the invitations for that meeting is that the city kindly shared their mailing list with us for those that got formal notice in the mail within 120 meters. So it was a very extensive mailing list, pages long. As you can appreciate, there are a lot of property owners in the area, and I apologize for any folks on Adrian Street who didn't get that. We wouldn't have known how to contact them, and just did want to clarify that we did an extensive mailing to each property owner within 120 meters, inviting them to the meeting at the Parkdale Community Center.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was muchly appreciated. Okay, seeing that we've seen anyone in the gallery, I need a motion to refer this to the PAC meeting. Moved by Councillor Boyce, second by Councillor Graham. All in favor? All opposed? That's carried. Thank you. I need a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Carr, second by Councillor Miller. All in favor? That's carried. So now we go over to the advisory committee meeting. and you have your agenda before you. The attendants were all here, as of myself taking the seat for Councillor Jackie Deniers. And also Mike Letwin is absent. Thank you very much, Mr. Joyce. Item number 2, disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Seeing none. Confirmation of the minutes. Need a motion. The minutes of the City Council Planning Committee meeting and the Planning Advisory Committee meeting held the 4th of June 2018. Moved by Councillor Joyce. Moved by Mr. Joyce. Second by Councillor Carr. Things are happening fast. All in favor? All opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Deputation, seeing none today. Also on your agenda, item number 5, the clerk was kind enough to hand you the paper copy of the email, the correspondence, and it was addressed to Mr. Matt McDonald, and it's identifying 645 Sydney Street, and they have a little wish list there on some fencing on the north and east side. So I just need a motion to receive that. So can I get a motion to receive that? Moved by Councillor Carr, second by Councillor Graham. Any questions? All in favor? All opposed? That's carried. So we got a couple referrals from our first meeting. So 6.1, proposed amendment to the zoning bylaw number 10-245, as amended, 135 Station Street and 50 Albion Street, Belleville, County of Hastings, file number B771051, application owner 199-3388 Ontario Inc., and the agent is RFA Planning Consultants, and the resolution is before you. Do you want me to read it? Thank you. So it's moved by Mr. Joyce as read, and it's second by, going once, Mr. Baltutis. So it's on the floor. Any questions? Staff, Councillor Boyce.
Just that I'm not going to support it for the main reasons that I believe it's too big of a project and too small of a space. I believe that, as I said, I'm certainly for affordable housing, but not at any cost. I don't believe there's enough parking. I believe we have issues with Albion Street that will just exasperate the whole issues already. And I believe that the green space has been sacrificed in this area to cram more things in. I think if we don't approve it, then they can come back with a much more palatable, hopefully, drawings and proposal that, like I say, this is too big of an item in too small of a space for parking and such.
Thank you. Anyone else on the floor? Mr. Baltutis?
Thank you. On page 9, there's a note 2I. It says there's a holding provision is attached to require stormwater management to the satisfaction of the city. Has that gone through that process already, or is it still being discussed and reviewed?
So there was a stormwater management plan submitted in support of this application. The development engineer still had a number of questions that she wanted answered before she would support the application. The applicants had requested that consideration be given to approve the application with a hold while those questions were addressed, to give them the sort of support to move forward with the project.
Right. Now, I know on those, thank you for that, the catch basins for the oil and silt or dirt, who would look after those? Would the owner would have to maintain those, and were they required to have a log that they've been pumped on a regular basis? So the city could inspect them, saying, let's not get them over full. So I know we put some of those on at the site at Belleville General Hospital or Quinte Healthcare, and they seem to work pretty well.
Just some history that Stephen maybe isn't aware of. I mean, through the years, we have had numerous oil grit separators installed in subdivisions and in commercial developments. Typically, if this project moves ahead and we get into a site plan agreement, it will have provisions in it that require the owner to do annual maintenance on the oil grit separators, and typically we require them to submit an engineer's report stating that the unit is being maintained, it has been cleaned, and it is functioning as it was intended to function.
Questions from the floor? Councillor Miller?
It's not so much a question, but again, I go back to the parking aspect of it, and in as much as we like to think that because it's in the downtown area that perhaps less parking is required, but I truly have a concern about that aspect of it because we don't know. And if we're applying the downtown concept to something that's really in a heavy residential area with a lot of streets coming together, I mean, don't get me wrong, I like the concept of what's being proposed, and I'm hoping that we can make this fit. But at the same time, I'm not seeing it fit right now, and I think there have also been a number of concerns expressed by Mr. Labarge that have been brought to us pictorially as well as with his comments that need to get worked out before I'm prepared to say yes or no on the project. But the parking and also that traffic study that seems to be pending would be information that I would like to at least have back before making a decision on it.
Okay. So, Councillor Carr?
Thank you, Mayor Christopher. And I share the same concerns. I actually toured the property on Friday with Mr. Labarge at his request and had an opportunity to see it from all angles. And I'm concerned about the elevation and what's there. And in fact, one of the photos there on the top left, you see where the fencing is that Mr. Labarge provided. The water was actually up much higher and was flooding out on the neighbor's property, and or his brother's property. You could see it. And so I'm concerned with the fact that even during this initial phase of moving some land around is negatively impacting the neighbor's land, which is a problem, and I think that needs to be mitigated first before we even get into the larger piece of what the post-construction project will look like. So I'm a little disappointed that this is allowed to go on and basically as is, and then the neighbors get impacted. The thing with parking that I find interesting is that, you know, we had another applicant here that brought forward a very successful proposal on affordable housing for seniors, and what he had suggested was, I'm required under policy to provide so many parking spaces, but in fact, by the time I get the tenants in there, I don't have any need for parking. And I think there was a reference to one of his buildings, he has 3 cars parking in this very big parking lot. So it's kind of a catch-22. Given the fact that it's affordable housing at a set rate to the market, I don't think there's going to be the need for cars that there would, say, in the second application before us. The concern is that there's a need for parking for the other uses in the vicinity. And I would argue that they would have a hard time policing as to who's actually parking there. You may end up actually getting vehicles off the street using that parking lot. The other side of it too, and Councillor Boyce brought it up, was Albion Street and access. And the agent referred to the fact that Sydney Street would be the primary entrance and exit. Well, unless you have somebody there flagging traffic in and out, they're going to choose which way they want to enter and exit that property. One would argue that Albion Street would be more convenient than trying to pull out right there at Station Street. So I'm not too hung up on the parking per se, because I think at the end of the day, the tenants there won't require the parking that's required by policy per se. My bigger issue is this property as it stands right now and its impact on the local neighbors is a disgrace. And that needs to be rectified immediately in my mind. And then from there, I share Councillor Miller's same thoughts that the traffic impact and the stormwater management plan are critical documents I think that we need to see in order to make a decision. And we're being asked to make a change to the zoning with a bunch of what ifs, and to make an informed decision, and in fairness to the property owners in the vicinity that will be impacted daily, we need to make a sound decision based on that information. So I would prefer to actually see this item tabled until we have that information.
So I'm not identifying a tabling motion, but I just want to talk on the resolution. And Mr. Joyce has put it on the floor, was seconded by Mr. Baltutis. Under this process, if it gets defeated on the floor, the applicant has 100+ days to appeal it. If the mover and the seconder would maybe take the direction that Councillor Carr is mentioning, maybe send it back to the applicant and ask him to reconsider and look at all the points that were presented today. Everything's been documented, and then they can do their due diligence with the neighbors and with our staff, and they can bring it back. But I'm just making that recommendation if you'd reconsider any wording in your motion. You comfortable with that?
Yes, I would accept that,
Okay.
because I don't want it to be denied tonight.
Okay, that's fine.
I think we need to, I think it needs to move forward, and if tabling is the action item, I will agree with that.
Okay, I'm not identifying the word table. If you want to table it and send it back, I have no problem with that. We'll put that in there. So it's moved by Councillor Boyce. Is that approved by Mr.? No, I know. Mr. Baltutis did. So Mr. Boyce, I'm sorry, Mr. Joyce. You guys sitting too close together. Mr. Joyce is moving that we table it and send it back to the applicant to do the reconsideration and bring it back to the staff. Correct, Mr. Joyce? Yes. And Mr. Baltutis, you second. Are you comfortable with that?
I am comfortable, but I just want to make a comment that I think when they present their site plan to the city's engineering department, I think a lot of these issues will go away. I think the stormwater thing will go away, the pond will disappear, the property is going to be graded properly so that it's not affecting neighbors around it, so it should be. Yep. Been there, happened to me, and the city was great, did a lot of help for me years ago on that issue, and I think it'll go away once the city engineering department sees it, but I will follow Mr. Joyce.
Okay, so it's a win for everybody. Any questions on the resolution? All in favor? All opposed? That's carried. 6.2, it's before you, the proposed draft plan of subdivision and proposed amending zoning bylaw number 10245 is amended 645 Sydney Street, Part 1 and 4 plan.
Mr. Chair, I'll move as read.
Thank you very much. So it's moved by Mr. Ray as read. Do I have a seconder? Second by Mr. Baltutis. So that puppy's on the floor. Any questions from the floor for staff? Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mayor Christopher. Just a couple of things, and one is in relation to the privacy fencing. I think, and I'm looking to staff for clarification, but what I'd like to see is that the privacy fencing be included, and included as per the correspondence. I think in addition to that, I think that it would be prudent from an environmental point of view that we request that any natural vegetation or trees be maintained where possible, in addition to the privacy fence. The privacy fences are rather sterile, and I think if we go a long ways in terms of maintaining some vegetation. The other thing that I want to ask, and just make sure it's included here, is where we've had these townhomes in different places, and I've talked to staff about this, where essentially the whole front yard becomes one big driveway. And I don't get the sense that that's going to be the case here, but I want to make sure that we have some provision in play so that there is actually a lawn in front of these residents.
Good question. Staff.
Certainly, through the chair to Councillor Carr, the city's zoning bylaw does have provisions that deal with residential zones, and they I guess they do allow for a 6-meter wide driveway. Anything beyond 12-meter lot frontage is restricted to only covering half of the front yard with driveway. But I'm just trying to think what the typical frontage is on these lots. Yeah, in the 6 to 7 to 8 meter range. So I mean I guess our current general provisions in our zoning bylaw would serve to limit some of them, but perhaps not all of them.
Okay, thank you. Good point, Councillor Carr. Mr. Baltutis?
I guess I'm stuck with these pond and water catchments. Now, who owns this pond that's there now? Is that?
Okay, we'll get that answer for you to staff.
That's City Balva Pond.
Okay, so who maintains it? Is there a chance, like if it's been there since the 90s, it would naturally just fill in with water runoff and get silt built up? Which brings me, my question is, because the gentleman's had water in his backyard with that, when we had all that water, it rains, and the pond should carry all that.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to get into a discussion on why there's water in their backyard. My guess is that pond wasn't designed to take water from their backyard, so there may be some ponding naturally occurring in their backyard, just as there is on the subject property. As one of the speakers mentioned, there's regularly areas with a foot of water in that field. So some of that could be moving over that can't get into the pond and into some of the backyards. That's a likely cause of it. As far as your original question, the city's Environmental Operational Services Department maintains all stormwater ponds in the city. So they have a program to look at those ponds, and typically a pond like that, it has to be dredged out from time to time, probably anywhere from the 10 to 20 year time frame. It would need dredging out because of that silt buildup. And that pond is it's a very comprehensive system that runs north to Bell Boulevard. There's a forebay that is located between the No Frills store and the former Zeller's location that goes right up to Bell Boulevard, and that area it would be intended to settle out a lot of the settlement, and the pond to the south is more for quantity control, where you're simply holding the water and slowly releasing it into the Lemoyne Street storm sewer. So there is a program to look at those ponds on a regular basis.
Right, that's very interesting. Thank you.
Okay. No, good question. Mr. Joyce?
And just for clarification, didn't they say they were also doing a ditch too at the end of the stormwater to help mitigate some of the potential problem there too? So I think that combined with what Mr. Beauvais just explained should cover that. On the presenter, it's on there. It identifies some work that they're going to do for the stormwater plant.
No, it's a good point. Any more questions from the floor? Mr. Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, I'm just wondering what would the timeline be for the upgrade to Tracy Street at that point? You know, I know that Tracy doesn't have all of the amenities that some of them do.
Yeah, Tracy Street is a collector road as was identified, so it is intended to carry heavy volumes of traffic. It does carry heavy volumes of traffic. It is identified certainly in staff's 10-year plan, and if I'm not mistaken, it's actually been part of our capital budget proposal in recent years past, and has been taken off the list a couple of times. I guess I'd also point out that the city is working on the widening of Sydney Street from roughly Maple Drive to Bell Boulevard, and the widening of the Bell Boulevard-Sydney intersection. And part of that work will involve the realignment of the Tracy and Sydney Street intersection with the development of some proper turning lanes. So traffic flow at that intersection should be significantly improved when that work is done. Later this year, you'll start to see the hydro line on the east side of Sydney Street moved out of the way so that widening of Sydney Street can occur. And then hopefully we'll move to construction of that project next year. And we'll continue to bring forward Tracy Street for consideration of reconstructing going forward.
Thank you. Great, good news. Any more questions on the resolution? So it was moved by Mr. Ray, seconded by Mr. Baltutis. I'll call the question. All in favor? All opposed? That's carried. Item number 7 on our agenda, reports. Seeing none. Item number 8, information matters. Seeing none. Item number 9, general business and inquiries. I'll go around the queue. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mayor Christopher. And I mentioned this at the last meeting. I want to point it out again. So the application for the property on Station and Albion Street, I drove by there, and the public notice sign was set back approximately 12 feet from the sidewalk, and it was already a small print as it was. And so in terms of accessibility, people being able to see it from the sidewalk, we should be placing that as close to the sidewalk as possible. So again, I just point that out to staff.
Very good call. Oh, good point. It was number 9. Seeing nothing else, I need a motion to adjourn. Number 10, moved by Councillor Boyce, second by Mr. Baltutis. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Have a great evening.